Welcome to Speak Sex. I am your host, Eurydice. I am your sex whisperer here in the podcast universe, and I have three women artists, also sex whisperers, with me here today. And it's going to be a rich and an interesting conversation because we want to speak to the emotional intelligence within our sexuality and the social and personal, internal, conditioning, censorship within our sexuality, and how we go about it, how we navigate these 3,000 years of of being this way at this moment. So welcome to the show. So with me I have Suau, who is an artist and an educator, and I have Hasen, who is an artist, sexual activist, educator, therapist, and Rebecca Langer. Mm-hmm. And you are an artist and an educator, and also you are you mostly do movement, and you produce write shows, performances,
right?
Yeah. So it's a little more like body focused. So yeah, I would like to start with this. Here we are, we're women who have a sense of presence in the world. Mm-hmm. So that's already something that we've done that's probably unlike our ancestors and the women we come from, but it comes with with a price to pay. It comes with criticism. It comes with doubt, self-doubt, family doubt, career costs, tags, all kinds of doubtable.
And it also
tagging
is now then, because things have changed so much, and we have decided to be courageous in that, taking on what womanhood means now or can mean. It requires us also to work through generational traumas or ancestral
absolutely.
Conversations mm-hmm. that are no longer relevant. I think about all the time how my grandmother would ask me to stay behind during daytime chores, and my brother could go out and play. And when she was a child, her mother was property, and she was a breeder, and my grandmother was also a breeder.
Yeah,
and
mine too, for sure.
Right, and then it's maybe our mother's generation, maybe even as far back as our grandmother's generation, where we started to shift, where we could finally vote, or we finally came to a country where women can vote, where our voices were heard a little bit more, where women
had our own bank accounts and were able to have some agency and make financial decisions.
That's all recent. And and women, especially young women, present company excluded, Haley, forget that. They take for granted the gains of the feminists, of the at least 2-3 main waves of feminists, and they're huge. I mean, where I come from, the island of Lesbos, you'd think that thanks to the lesbians, right, there would be some sort of progressiveness. But no, my grandma was definitely a breeder. She married the town priest, and wore black her whole life, and had kids, and then cooked for all of his guests and the bishops and whoever. That's it, life. And was at the loom, and she was weaving, and she was making everybody's clothes, and she was working the field. It's really like a form of indentured slavery. She had no independence, no life of her own, never went out of the house alone except to shop. It wouldn't occur to her to go sit at the cafeteria with her girlfriends. That was not a concept.
It was revolutionary then, and it's so normal and taken for granted now. Mm-hmm. So I think about as we step forward. I mean, I absolutely respect what the younger generation is pushing for, and really the push for different names, for not being in a category, for really having the flow in sensuality, to be sexually categorized in
right,
ways that we had never
non-binary,
been before.
non-gender specific. But that's a minority.
Right. However,
Yes.
it's
Right?
Yes.
It's a tiny minority. It just happens to be who we know and who we like.
But I feel like that conversation is so much more active in the younger community than in the older community because of where we've come from, who we've learned from, what the norms were, and how they're changing now. To me, I mean, I'm in it every day, so it feels like a revolution, and everything's shifted so much from the age of my great-grandmother and my grandmother, which I had the pleasure to interact with. But like, I was taught to cook and clean and serve, and whatever time was left over was those scraps of times were the only ones that I deserved. And I'm not approaching it from a space of anger. I'm approaching it from the space of wonder. Like, wow, I would have been, if I was born 100 years ago, I would have been raised and trained to be a breeder, to be a maid.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And
yeah.
have the scraps of time for me because I wouldn't deserve, quote unquote, anything else.
And you wouldn't have had like words. I mean, there were no terms for the alternative. So it was inconceivable, it was unthinkable. You know, you were born to fucking survive, which now we call like survival mode. But like that was real, you know. My mom wanted to be, sorry to interrupt, my mom wanted to be a teacher. And I mean, I'm young. She's young, you know, she's still like, now she has girlfriends and goes out to the cafe. Big like, the big revolution. But like she never had a bank account. She never had a job. You know, being the daughter of the priest, you know, my dad like chose her for her looks or whatever. You know, I think the looks, but maybe other, let's hope other qualities, I don't know. But he went to her dad and asked for her hand in marriage. And so my mom married a man like she'd never kissed before. Oh, wow. And tell me if that's not rape. I mean, like you get married in front of everyone, you know. She was 18, she was incredibly shy at the time. You're seen by everyone, and then you're thrown in a room with this guy who like really is hot for you and wants you. That's why he went to all this freaking trouble. And you don't know anything. Like you know, maybe you know about kissing or you had like a little crush in school.
Maybe you don't even know how your body works.
You don't know anything about how your body works. Are you kidding me?
Women today barely know how their body works. So I'm definitely not going back.
My mom didn't know the clitoris at all. I mean, there was no clitoris, you know.
Education then.
No, you know, when I got pregnant, my mom insisted there is only one hole, that it's the same passage. I'm like, Mom, I don't know. I know. It's insane, you know, but like, where are they going to learn? I mean, it's not on TV. Mm-hmm. It's not in the newspapers. Like in the old country, like there's no sex ed books in Greek, you know, that my mom would like go by herself to the bookstore and buy for what? Yeah. Like she's just lying there and, you know, dreaming of England and hoping, you know, like she had not given a blowjob. She was like, what? That's so gross. You know, like this whole idea of like, you know, urine or excrement being like, you know, so horrifying, you know, that like oral sex was not even welcome. Yeah. All of that stuff is recent, and I didn't know it before the podcast. And I'm sorry to be hogging the mic, I'll pass it on. But I'm sharing this because I had no idea before I started the podcast 2 years ago. And so I started it as a response to Me Too. And I thought we were like all way ahead, like the people I know. And I realized that no, that people like my mom are everywhere in America, in so many communities.
In the world.
Well, in the world, forget it, absolutely. They're the vast majority. I mean, you know, if you take like countries like, you know, Muslim countries or India or China, you know, extremely populated and repressed countries then. But I'm saying even in like the West, even in America, like the freest nation, right? Mm-hmm. It's just, you know, the power of tradition and social judgment and religion and all of that is still more powerful than our, you know, our movement is. Oh, yeah. And that's why Liz Warren, you know, had to pull out. I mean, because everyone, all for whatever reason, the polls showed that America of all places is not ready for a woman president. I mean, what?
That the smarter she was, the more she was able to articulate her plan, the more people were intimidated by her and saw it as condescending instead of recognizing, wait, that's the smart adult in the room.
Yeah.
There was an insecurity about a woman who's intelligent and in power. That's astounding.
And she got it from all sides. Mm-hmm. She got attacked from every side. It's just unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, with Hillary, okay, but this was like, yeah. So here we are. We gotta talk about it. Yeah. So go ahead. Who wants to
I have
share?
a million ideas.
Please go ahead,
man.
Patty.
We were talking about our parents or grandparents, the older generations, how we still live in absolute repression, and then checking in with myself. I'm going to speak from my own perspective because it's what I know. When I am sitting in my sensuality and I'm connected with, can I say pussy? Can I say the bad word?
Yes,
the
you
bad
can
word,
say
quote, unquote.
Say it.
Yeah.
It's like when I'm sitting in my
Pussy power.
sensual, sexual energy, and I really feel my pussy power. That's where I feel like I have so much power that I feel like I channel God. And
absolutely,
that sounds insane,
but I think that's true for everyone.
Yeah, it's the magic of being able to bring life into this world is something that we're attached to as women that we may take for granted because it's we never not see it, right? So to have that connection with God, to be this portal, to be connected to that sexual, sensual energy is my power source. And when I can show it, I feel like people understand that I know my worth because I know that I have value, and it's through that sexuality, right? When it is repressed, when I'm told that that's bad or wrong or judged for it, I feel like other people are imposing my power to be lessened. So then I step into my masculine. And when I step into my masculine, I have no space to be feminine. Then the masculine that's around me does not have the space to be masculine as well. So then there's this really weird off-kilter, off-balance dynamic.
Well, I think that, we all have feminine and masculine in us. And it is, and it's kind of interesting because, we kind of arbitrarily can call it. And there is, I'm sure, no, it's not a science. There is no exact rule. A lot of it comes from our cliche understandings of masculine and feminine as we've known them through patriarchy. So the first thing, I always try to say is that we have lived in this system, we speak the language of this system, we have the values of the system of patriarchy, we have the currency of the system, we get paid by the system. So it's not like there is an alternative that any of us have access to.
Right.
It doesn't exist, in our consciousness, in our memory, in our history, in our written, learning, in whatever, our value system of good and bad, it doesn't exist. So we have to start from that, understanding that there is no actual space for, let's say, matriarchy or non-patriarchy. We're
I think
imagining it.
That's a great point that you bring because we all live in a patriarchal society, and whether we talk about it or not, we understand the masculine so much better than the feminine because in our society we are paid or we are rewarded for our masculine ways of we work, we get our checklist done. But what encapsulates the feminine, which is rest, pleasure, break, stop, rest, daydreaming, dreaming. We pay to have access to do that.
Union, support, empathy, caretaking.
So much of the feminine aspects are seen as
intimacy.
Yes. Yeah. Are seen as either a chore.
Selflessness.
Yes.
Fuck. Yeah.
You're selfish. You're selfish if you're selfless. But that's the most selfless act to do, to take care of yourself. And it when we rationalize it seems so far away because it comes with a big price tag.
Yeah.
Because it takes up so much space, and it's not until you have fuck you money that you can actually take care of yourself. And I feel like that's so backwards if we can do that. If we can make space in the patriarchy to allow for a respected space for feminine energy activities that
Yes, such as mothering,
Yeah.
which
Oh, yeah.
you spoke of. Mothering, like why are we not paid to be mothers? Is there anything more important in society than raising the
Yeah.
young? You know,
Oh, and we
but
put
we
it
have to
so
have
much
like
on people.
an extra job and or like hire help or whatever. Put the kid in front of the TV because because we still have to somehow make money in men's world in a masculine way that's understood as such. So if you say, what do you do for a living? And you say, I'm a mom. Well, the assumption is, you have some dude supporting you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
to
Or you
like
come
raise
from a
his
wealthy
fucking
family.
kids. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There is no system to value the feminine. The raising, the advising, the consulting, the coaching,
Yeah.
the supporting, the kind of opening up consciousness, all of that comes from the feminine. And no one, there is no monetary support.
No, and then we ridicule women who don't want to carry a child. So you're on the short end of both sticks. It's like, oh, you're going to be so selfish to not bring a child in this. Like, this is your duty. You're on earth. You have your uterus. Like, it's supposed to carry a child. But some women don't want children.
And the system's not set up to support women and families who have children. They're
Yeah.
not, those who choose not to, maybe choosing not to for economical reasons because
Exactly.
we don't have the
Yeah.
resources. So, it's a no-win situation
Yeah.
for women who are trying to make decisions for themselves, but also for just the general health and wellness of their entire families, whether it's a
Yes.
family member who came from their body or people that we have to take care of because they're our family and that we're responsible for. And it's not that caretaking element is not something that's taken into consideration, and it's very rare that you see it shared equally among sexes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's never shared equally, and that's bullshit. The guys are so fucking proud of themselves and advertise it endlessly, whatever. But like you said, it's because for thousands of years the women served for free. So it doesn't. The only way. And the only way women even came out is because of war. Like every time
Yeah.
there is a huge war, a bunch of guys die, and we get a little bit of freedom.
Yes. You're allowed to have sex. We're
I know.
asking you to have
I
sex and
know.
populate the earth. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. It's
I think about ancient times, right? And empire building. And I'll probably be corrected because maybe it's inaccurate what I say, but in my imagination, it works so beautifully how in empire building, it's so important to secure resources, right? So you get your guns, you get the food, you have the army, but in order to have an army, you need to have a steady source of humans. And how do you have a steady source of humans? You control the resource. So if you want to sell flowers, you buy the farms, or you have partnerships with the farm where you have
The fields,
steady
and
access to it, right? So if you are constantly in a warring phase and you need a big army, how are you then going to control the production of humans? Get the superpower of
Rape,
the feminine,
mass rape.
make
Yeah.
it wrong, make the superpower wrong, so that then you can use the superpower to your own advantage, or use the superpower of bringing in life, which is a shared act, not only for women, but the superpower of bringing the child into, and sex and sensuality and everything that's magnetic about that sexual energy, make it bad, make it wrong, make it dirty. And so when it happens, then you come of sin, you're made of sin, and when you are born from sin, into sin, for sin. So then it's justified to have war. So it's justified to have empire and control and governments and systems, and then, things that are of the masculine energy, which is, religion, government, systems, organization, and
Right.
not so much of the feminine, which is the
Right.
rest, restoration, pleasure,
Well,
mothering.
seasons, the cycles of nature, death belongs to feminine. We get,
Yeah.
we get caring for the death. We get birth, we get pain, we understand the animal nature. And, but I feel that kind of the whole fall from Eden bullshit story.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
is the like telling paradigm. It's like separating humanity from nature, humanity from the garden. We were separated from what came to us naturally, which is the feminine domain.
Yeah.
And then from then on, we have been like reconditioned and re-socialized in all kinds of these masculine modalities, empires
So
or
much
not.
trauma. So
Right.
much
All
trauma from
for the woman.
Yeah, and if you think about it, we were in the bodies of our grandmothers.
But like you said, that's sorry to interrupt, but like that's the split, that kind of like cosmogony or like original myth of Eden.
The
'Cause
original sin,
in the
right.
story, Eve or women did not give birth, and then when they lost, when like they tried to steal knowledge, they had to give birth, and they had the pains of birth and then the pains of death. So it completely like fucked up the truth. The truth is they were always giving birth, or there wouldn't be a woman and a dude anywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
We're here, therefore.
Yeah. They were procreating. Everything was procreating everywhere, all around. There was not, but to make the procreation into the punishment, into the pain, into the suffering, that's how they turned it around. And it's kind of like stayed in that way, which I think protects, I don't want to say, protects the masculine from the feminine, and that's like the system that we're in.
It definitely does, because when you talk about if you're having sex and you're giving birth, as long as it's within wedlock, in most religions and in society, your child isn't of sin. Like especially in today's education system, it's very heterosexual, penis, vagina, that's how we populate this earth, that's how you have sex. And then like one of the things I like to educate and bring into spaces is that we get to define what sex is. Like I've had so many different sexual experiences. The first time I masturbated, I counted that as my sexual debut. And I'm like, okay, here's penetrative sex, but there's people who don't have penetrative sex. And who are we as a society to be like, oh, you don't count, like your values or whatever, you're not gonna be able to populate. Whatever you're doing right now is a sin. And so we carry that onto people, and that's like, why should we carry that?
Yeah. I mean, especially I think like more in the rest of the world than in America, but procreation really should kind of like be, in my opinion, returned to women who go through it. And I understand it's a partnership, whatever, pay, that's like, to me, it's like kissing ass. It's not a partnership. He does very little. He comes.
And then goes sometimes.
Yeah. He comes, and whether he goes or not, he's got the option, right? Yeah. He doesn't carry shit. And if he doesn't want to, he doesn't have to like participate.
Yeah.
Right. And if you don't give him the paperwork, like if you don't give him the social contract that confirms that like these kids belong to him and will inherit him, I doubt he'll be hanging around, for the rest of their lives, like fully present. So it's women's, that's like ours. And I feel that, that's the power that has been taken away. And that's when you were saying like sexual power and creative power are the same, right? So like that's our womb power and our creativity as, artists, as thinkers,
where we
as
tap into
game
God.
changers, when we tap, exactly.
Or the universe,
exactly.
or prana, chi,
Like,
all the things.
all of stuff.
Yeah.
The unified field that doesn't separate us.
And can feel very dangerous, because so much of the sexual power is hypnotizing and it's intoxicating, and once you're in, it's like, oh my God, when you feel this connection with someone, it's so magnetizing that you forget how to think logically, and that's really powerful, to the point where it could be intimidating, because how many people, specifically men, have made really dumb ideas to chase pussy, and then the idea of, or the word, don't be a pussy, bro, it's like, are you kidding me? We say that all
Don't
the
even
time.
get me started when people use female derogatory
Right.
language to describe a man. That's like,
Or it's
Weak.
something that's
it's just
not
it's equated
right.
with weakness. Yeah.
But then when you think
it's like
about it,
phallic power
Yeah,
and
and you
vaginal
ask-
weakness.
and you ask, why would you say pussy for something that's so powerful? Like, how many stupid decisions have you made following pussy? You see how
Right, yeah,
hypnotic
yeah,
and how
yeah,
intense it is.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah.
And, you know, if we can't make logical sense out of it, and it's just because we exist, we're already cyclical, we're unpredictable.
Oh, yeah.
We don't even know ourselves what we're going to be thinking tomorrow, let alone them, you know? Them, like whoever represents the masculine, be a woman or a man, it could be a little scary trying to figure it out. And so that's how I've rationalized the generational trauma, ancestral trauma of the experience of womanhood, but also going back to the very beginning where the kids are like, I'm not a girl or a boy and I'm going to dress however I want. I find that so incredibly enticing because then I don't have to ascribe to what my grandmother told me and I don't have to fold the laundry and fuck this shit about whatever scraps of time are for me. I'm going to walk in my full sensuality because I've chosen to have that power. And it also has been the most difficult thing I've done in my life. How difficult is it to rebel, to be your full sensual or sexual self?
Oh, it's very difficult. You know, definitely you get punished in the marketplace.
And you're
by
told
everyone.
you shouldn't. I mean, it's at the heart of the cultural wars we're facing right now in this country
Right.
is control over
And
the
judgment,
feminine.
yeah.
The control over who has the right to procreate, control over our bodies, control over what our desires are. So you're rebelling against millennia of indoctrinated ideas of who should actually control that.
Yeah. And let's say that the feminine, because this is what I believe, the feminine is the thing that provides purpose. And I also believe everyone has both feminine and masculine within them, right? But the feminine component is the component that provides purpose. So if we're looking at a map, the feminine is the X where the treasure is, right? And the masculine is the way to get to that map, right? So if you're trying to control the feminine, you're trying to be the one to declare the purpose, right? But sometimes we just need to relax and like this whole, I have this aha moment. That aha moment is so powerful. We don't know where it's going to come from. We don't know how we get it. We don't, it just appears. And that's so much of the feminine nature. I would love to.
I want to say, sorry, go ahead.
I would love to empower myself with that purpose and just walk on stage and say, you know, I am purpose. Look at me, listen to me. I will organize you. I am your God or your dictator or your power source, right? And I feel like that's how we've been living in our society for millennia. And so I get really hopeful listening to the kids say, wait, but that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but let's see what happens. They're young. I'm super hopeful, but I don't know. And then I hear all these stories about high schools and what happens on the field trip on the bus and whatever. So it seems like also a lot of replayed traumatic experiences from our time. But the purpose that you're saying. Is really like the animal nature. It's the procreative purpose.
Yeah.
It's what nature has made us. It's what we all menstruate and we all have the hormonal cycles and we all and men, when men get turned on, they get turned on because they want to maybe make baby. But what interests me as a feminist is that over and above that. If you give the body freedom, if you give at least the female body freedom, I don't speak for the masculine body, it can get to that place without the incredible, passionate intimacy connection.
Absolutely.
And learning that, as a woman, that you can find, orgasm, whatever, ejaculation, the equivalent of an amazing let's say conception, not that we can pinpoint that moment, but that same feeling when sometimes you feel like, oh my God, I'm sure I conceived because this was like so huge. You can get that without the tropes of like the romance and the prince, saving the princess who's like sleeping and he comes to kiss her and he wakes her up or whatever, the stuff that we've grown up on, which tells us that we're required to have that,
other person.
That
we
other
need that second party.
of any gender, and it doesn't matter if they're, binary and if they are they or whatever, that we have, that we're depending on that. So it's different if you choose to be, in love, in union, in exchange with someone, and if we feel that like that's our only option if we want to access that, right? Because it's not. We can access things, power on our own.
Absolutely.
And that's like the ultimate message. Like that's the ultimate truth.
Yeah. Have anybody read the book Posse by Regina Thomas-Schauer?
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. It's phenomenal. So there's this passage that talks about a teenage girl and how she feels really sexy and she feels empowered, and her neighbor, little boy, one day comes over and kisses her, and she feels like a woman, and she feels whole and complete and like fully empowered as a human being. And so because of this kiss, she thinks that she needs him now. She thinks that she can only access that level of security and empowerment and womanhood and deliciousness.
With him alone, of all people,
with
only
him alone,
right.
or with a partner, not realizing that that is something that one can access on their own.
Right.
But it's also something that we're not taught, and I think collectively, me specifically, I didn't think about that until not that long ago. And for me, it shifted my life completely. I like partnership. I like sharing my life. I like having people around.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
but the idea of I want you and I don't need you is so freeing.
That's it. Yeah.
Because then, what an honor to have a partner and say,
That's
actually,
right.
I
I
choose you.
Yeah.
Right,
But I
yeah.
don't need you. So
Right.
if you're gonna go, you're not gonna destroy me.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we're here with consent, creating a
Right.
life together.
Exactly.
Whoa.
Whoa is right. Yeah. Whoa.
Well,
yeah.
it's frowned upon, especially being like identifying female, to be single, and like no one wants to die alone. Like no one should ever be alone. But I like learned I can have intimate relationships that are completely platonic, some that are just strictly sexual in nature, and then some that experiment with both. And that doesn't make me any less of a human. I've learned that if I don't love myself, I can't expect anyone to love me the way that I need to be loved. And I get frowned upon all the time in my community of like, oh, well, you're so cute. Like, why are you single? Like, someone asked me if I had webbed feet. And that's why I was single. Like,
That's so cool.
yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't even.
Most
I've never
bizarre.
met anyone
reason
with
for
webbed
why.
feet.
Yeah, because they were like, well, on the outside, like why wouldn't you have a
So there must be a defect.
Yeah, so I must have
In
a
the
defect.
feet, no less.
Yes. And I was like, oh, no, I choose to be single. Like, if I wanted someone, I
What
could
community are you from?
Well, I'm in Atlanta based right now, so very Southern, Republican, conservative cultures. And then my mom's from Miami and my dad's from New York City, so I wasn't raised very Southern. And
Right. So
my
you were
community
a little
looked
bit of an
down,
outlier.
down on
Yeah.
my family, and they shunned any female that wanted to be sexually liberated.
Yeah.
And I've had to do a lot with that. That's why I didn't want to necessarily move back to Atlanta, because of all that shame and such shaming I received, and it created a lot of like erotophobia for me around how I presented myself. And then I went away to Arizona for undergrad, and that's where I kind of found myself. And like I learned to love me, and I always relied on having a man tell me I was worthy, and all the men I was seeing were completely toxic. None of them, like, they were just like, oh, I'm gonna grab your tummy and call you chubs. Or like, oh, you're never smart enough, so don't even worry about applying to these colleges. And then I would believe them because I thought, okay, they love me, like they're telling me what's true. And society was like, especially being in the South, like you have to find your high school, middle school sweetheart.
What is going on in the South? How are we turning the South around? May I ask you,
Yes.
having been there?
Yes.
I mean, we're a little bit of the South in Miami, and we're, you know.
I mean, I feel like the joke is that you have to go north to go south in Miami. We have to drive.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
true.
And honestly,
Yeah,
I don't
we
think
gotta
it's
go
unique to the
north.
South. I think it's something that permeates the culture in the United States in general. It's,
Yeah.
You know, aside from some of the larger coastal cities that are more metropolitan, that have larger
Right.
influences and far more diversity, you're going to find conservative pockets that hold to older belief systems of traditions of believing the patriarchy is the only
Yeah.
way. And it's that, for me, that's the question. I was like, how do we break that? How do you
Yeah.
break
Don't get me started.
Yeah,
centuries, millennia of a belief
yeah.
system?
Yeah,
Well, and the issue is why it's so important to vote is I've been a part of research studies. Only 9 states in the U.S. are required to teach consent-informed education, and a vast majority of the states in the U.S.
Sex education?
Yes, in schools, yeah. And a vast majority of the U.S. states don't have any rules or regulations as to how sex education is to be taught in the school system. So that's where you gotta get a lot of abstinence-only education. They don't have to bring in someone who is knowledgeable on the subject, and that's where you get a lot of very shameful things. Like if you have sex, you're gonna get pregnant, and like from Mean Girls, you have sex, you're gonna get pregnant, you're gonna die, and so it instills this fear onto us, and we don't teach that the female can receive pleasure. I was taught that I just lay there, the man is gonna feel great, I'll get pregnant, and that's my duty is just to lay there. I am a hole to be filled. Yeah. And
I mean, it's unimaginable.
Yeah.
That this is the 21st
And it's-
century, and you were
yeah.
taught that.
No, and
in
my-
Atlanta, Georgia,
Yeah.
which is a huge metropolitan
Yeah.
center.
Yeah,
Which is
my- And
yeah.
that's why I'm
to
trying
me, it's
to that's why I'm trying to be ASECT certified so I can start making change in these states that don't require
No,
any
we need to
base.
change the curricula
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, school per school, like middle school.
Yeah.
Middle school first, then high school. It
I'd
has
be
to be
teaching
in the
elementary.
curriculum.
I know. I think even
that,
elementary, because
Yeah.
then you start
even
them.
elementary, but with elementary, I feel like it has to be more hands-on and hopefully, yeah. But
that's
that
where
may
you-
be harder to
But
get
that's where
through.
you can start to
the
learn about
board
consent
of
too.
directors and the
Yes.
parents.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, for me, it's consent. We should learn at
Right.
such a young age.
yeah, I
And
don't think it's just consent. No, it's also what do you do? So how can the girl say no? Yes. What is she saying yes to?
Yes. Yes.
So we get we get consent.
Yes.
But what are we saying yes to if we don't speak sex? Which is
Yeah.
why I have
Yeah.
this podcast. Speaking sex,
Yeah.
is not the same as having sex.
Oh, yeah.
So after you say yes, it's not time to turn off the lights and do what you
Yeah,
said, right?
yeah.
No. After that, there should be a further dialogue and
Constant
further
communication.
communication. But we have to teach young people, people in school before they get the normative values already,
Yeah.
that it's okay to discuss it instead of just do it.
It's even sexier when you discuss
Right.
it.
But
I
for
mean,
so
how
many
much more
people,
fun.
it's
Yeah.
easier to have sex
Oh,
than
yeah.
talk sex
Yeah.
with each other, not with their girlfriends, but with each other.
With their partners.
Yeah,
and
with their
it's
partners.
a re-education that has to happen starting in the schools
Oh,
because then
yeah.
we're raising a generation that knows
Right.
how to
Well,
do
yeah,
it.
but
Generations.
Even just
Yeah.
now, people
Yeah.
that are out of schools that don't have that traditional way to learn things, there's a re-education that needs to happen
Right.
generationally.
Right, because they're going to be parents,
Yeah. Oh,
and those parents have to be open enough
Yeah.
to bring their children. But even so, if you're the parent and the vast majority of society continues this, narrative that is the dominant narrative, it doesn't make a big difference. I'm a single mom. I raised my daughter. I believe, in a feminist way. It doesn't matter. She was also doubly. She was raised in school
Yeah.
by the alternate, most dominant,
Yeah.
system of thinking. So she doesn't like that I'm doing this. I mean, she personally, as a feminist, she supports it 100%. She's as progressive, all for human rights, or for women's rights, or for prisoners' rights, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, so we did that. But the idea that it's her mom,
Yeah.
that's what she doesn't like. Just let anybody else, but not my own mother. I don't want my friends in school to. So why? Well, because
there's a shame.
the overall culture has not caught up.
Yeah.
So no matter what she feels personally, she still lives in this overall setup, and she like senses the judgment deep, like deep in her. And she like rather I do something more masculine, like whatever,
My
be a
parents
lawyer,
feel the
be a
same way.
teacher,
Yeah. Yeah, they see
Right.
what I do and they support me, but at the same time they're like, oh, we don't really want to hear like
We don't want to have to
everything you're
tell our
talking about."
friends.
They're not
Yeah.
going to tell their friends. My grandparents know. They love it.
Right.
They think it's fantastic and it's so important. And the other thing I try, like we teach kids, and that's the part where we should also be teaching parents, is if someone's going to say penis or vagina or nipples, breasts, don't be like, no, that's a bad word.
Yeah.
Because that will create the shame and that's not...
Yeah.
They're going to be like, oh, well, I want you to touch my cha-cha. And this other person doesn't know what cha-cha is. And
I don't.
Yeah. But like that was a term that I was taught to call your vagina.
That's
growing
so
up.
funny.
Yeah, because saying vagina would be the worst thing in the world.
Cha-cha.
And like I
gonna
now,
use that.
yeah. And like I reclaim the words like pussy and cunt because those are my parts.
Yeah.
And they're not bad words. And I used to get so offended when people would say cunt. Because I think I wasn't comfortable with my body. I was so afraid to
Because
say
people
vagina.
use it as a derogatory
Yeah.
term. Yeah. So our, one of like our numerous, tasks is exactly that, to take back the language. Yeah. And kind of like liberate it. I mean, when I was 20, I wrote my thesis, had the word cunt in every sentence.
Oh, I love that.
It was the story of a cunt. It was the story of a woman who got like attacked, assaulted in the street. And then her vagina was cut out, but then it had a life of its own.
Yes.
I love that.
But she's the cunt. But as such, like she goes to the museums and talk shows and, on the bus
Oh my
and
God, that's
in the
amazing.
subway. Right. So like everybody in normative society has to deal with it alone.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the main protagonist who kind of like starts off very ambivalent, split about her sexuality because she feels that like, her mind is what gives her worth, and she wants to be in her mind, and she kind of like resents whenever her pussy, makes her like wanna go have sex or
Yeah.
get off her path, of like
Her
masculine,
logical path,
her logical path. And by the end, of course, she's desperate for it and looking for it everywhere, and she can't wait to get reunited. But yeah, I did it in part, as a ritual, a self-ritual to force myself, because it's not easy. It's not
No,
easy.
it's not easy.
At all.
Yeah.
And then
To
society
use
looks
the
at you
word,
crazy
and
for
then I had
using
to
it.
go give readings, in front of strangers and say, her cunt this and her cunt that. And it's not easy. Like, it doesn't get easier, because all around us, there is the
There's
normative.
such a reaction to it too. So until we're all desensitized to it, till we're all able to normalize it and reclaim it, it's not going to be easy because
It's
you're going to
not.
say it. No matter how comfortable you are saying it or we are in this room, you'll be somewhere and say it, and someone outside who hasn't been part of that journey will just.
I'm not delusional.
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable. I mean, meaning, we choose this, but it's a choice that we
Yeah.
make. It's a choice like, having a child is a choice. It's unless you're like, kind of like there's something a little like, off, then you're not quite aware of your surroundings.
Yeah.
It's just not easy.
No, it's not. And that's where like the whole censorship and self-censorship comes in.
Self-censorship,
I'm
yeah.
constantly self-censoring myself. And I've come to an understanding that certain communities, certain groups aren't ready for the space that I take up. And so I will dial down my language. And I've learned to like give and take for certain communities. But when I'm in a community like this or within group settings like this, where I know like they will look at me and I'll say the word cunt and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait
Yes,
till I get to
I know,
that
right.
point in
Yeah,
my
yeah,
life where I can say that in public and
Yeah.
no one's going to look at me like I'm insane. And if some people look at me like I'm crazy, I'm like,
Or like you're cursing, or like
Yes.
you're cursing. Yeah, because I know people who use the word, but in an extremely, like that's their most derogatory
Yeah.
term.
yeah.
I think it's funny when we come into a conservative conversation or I don't know. Anyway, at some point we say, 3,000 people have died, like 3,000 kids have died, and nobody gives a shit. And sometimes people get more offended that the word shit has been said than 3,000
children.
kids have
Wow.
been, and I read this in an article and I don't remember enough to quote it, but that really resonated with me because why is cunt a bad word? English is my second language. And
Yeah, mine too. Even though yours, you don't sound like it.
I learned when I was 7. Cunt to me never sounded like a bad word. I've only ever read it, but I disassociated it, or I didn't read it in a long form. It's always been either as a poem. I don't know, something. Maybe I live in La La Land or something, but it's never been associated in my little universe as a bad word. So when people react to it, it's so foreign and it causes
Really?
resonance.
So you can say it to your mom or dad?
Well, they don't know
God,
English,
no.
so it's fine.
Well, I'm sure it exists in their native language.
Well,
yeah.
and-
Where are they from?
Cuba.
Okay,
And
yeah.
they were also raised in communist Cuba. So
Right.
religion is not a context for
Oh,
us
but
either.
listen, communism is super fucking
Oh,
repressive.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But when
I
somebody talks
I was
about...
a young communist in my country, and I was like shocked. I went there, I went there to be a rebel, and it was like, monogamy among the comrades.
Oh, yeah.
You gotta be faithful to your fucking comrade.
Oh, yeah.
Don't say those words.
It's the stiffest thing in the world.
Your life like belongs to the cause.
Oh, yeah.
We were like back to that, except instead of God, there was something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's bullshit.
It's bullshit.
It's one
There's
system
like
of
no
oppression
freedom
over the net.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. For women, for sure.
The reason why I bring it up is because there's so much conversation specifically about sex that at least in Catholic religion, which is the one that I have the most exposure to, there's this Catholic guilt.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Original sin and everything
Oh,
you do
yeah.
is bad and the Jewish community here in Miami is also really big.
Yeah.
And they also have the Jewish
Guilt.
guilt.
Oh, yeah,
So it's this
Judeo-Christian.
guilt.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? And then cunt, it's an acidic word, it'll cut you. And it's just like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
it'll cut you if you're an asshole to a cunt.
Yes.
Why?
Yeah. I mean, I have to say for myself, when I wrote that book and I was super young and it got published, it was translated in many languages. It was very successful.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes.
But that's not my point of the story. Yes, it made like 100 best books of this and that. When I was offered to have it translated in Greek, I said no. And it has not been, because, I thought of all the, like all the grandmas and the aunts who were like royalists,
yes.
and my parents, and my parents knew what it meant. I mean, I explained to them, I told them, I tried to translate some of it. But again, like my kid, it's like, yeah, they support you because they love you, but do they want to explain this to like their community? No. It's like, please no. Like, please do not make, a book like that, appear in the bookstores and all our friends are going to want to like support you and buy it, and then we'll be so ashamed. So it's like, you open up space, but then only so much because you don't want to hurt the people you love in the process. It's thick.
Well, and it also goes, I think, back to the feminine, because part of that is to be the caretaker, and part of that is to be cognizant and aware of the feelings of others. So if someone isn't comfortable with cunt, I respect that.
Yeah.
If
Completely.
someone isn't comfortable with the level of progressive that I identify with, I respect that. Where I
Right.
draw the line is when others' beliefs become oppressive.
Right.
Or imposed.
And imposed. Absolutely. When your belief system is so strict that it oppresses someone else and then you impose it upon everyone
Yeah.
else, I can't get with that. If you don't believe what I believe, I'm fine with that. And we need to coexist because we have to. But and that, I think, is, again, it speaks to what the feminine energy is. It is about coexisting. It is about growing and nurturing. But it's when we just find ourselves right up against that wall, and that wall is just about oppressing us and imposing that belief on us, that's when the fight back has to kind of come in.
Right, and the power of the the patriarchy to appropriate quickly anything is like extraordinary. So unless we're like on constant, alert and alarm, I
Which
feel
you can't be.
Which is like very hard to do when you live your life.
Yeah.
Whatever gains you've made can be like turned around, and used for profit by major corporations.
Yes.
Yeah, right, and turn into fashion and whatever, and then we're back to like
Yes.
scraping the bottom here. Yeah.
Earlier we were talking about how could it be possible to shift a whole system? Like, do we start in elementary school? Do we start with the existing adult population? How do we do it? And
and get away from tokenism,
Yeah.
which, by the way, I'm sorry to, a little parenthesis.
Yes.
The little freedoms we do have, like here we are
Yes.
in this podcast, it's all tokenism. They only tolerate us because we're not really heard. If this podcast was like Oprah Winfrey, it would be a very different response from the system. So long as we're kind of existing like semi-underground and preaching to the converted, I feel
it's not a threat. Then it's not
Right,
a threat,
it's not
and
a
they're not
threat,
worried
yeah.
about
Which is
it.
so
the
interesting.
the answer to this question you're about to give, how do we spread the message?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I've thought about how we interact in crowds, and I realized that the feminine, not necessarily women specifically, but the feminine is so collaborative because in nature it is nurturing and it is caring about what caring for and about other people, to form kind of like packs. The women's circles or community-based organization in a social space
without
where the feminine,
hierarchy.
right, where the feminine is supported, the feminine energy, right? So it allows us to have the power to be vulnerable, have the power to open up, have the freedom to speak and feel and shift and change, right? So it's no longer this lineal, I'm going to pull myself up from my own bootstraps, which is a bullshit idea anyway. And I'm going to do this by myself, and I'm going to go until I achieve. Rather, the whole communal aspect of, you know what, I'm going to get together with my 3 girlfriends and we're going to talk about this thing, and maybe 100 people will listen to that, and then we'll connect and weave into, and then as we gain critical mass, shift the ideology, which I believe we're getting to a point, within the next 100 years, where that is going to shift massively into a perspective that is much more nurturing and caring about the feminine, especially the sacred feminine.
Right.
And it's something that I know for a fact that my parents weren't taught. The 80s, the 70s, the 80s and the 90s were definitely masculine. Show me the money, let's do business, the internet.com, boom, I'm going to do this by myself. We're starting a business, but where's the space for vulnerability? Where is the space to say, hey, listen, I'm kind of scared right now. And a man can say that, not that they do, because they're not trained for that. But I'm kind of scared. Can you hold my hand a little bit? Or can we just witness me crying? Because it's hard. It's really hard right now. And I feel as women, it's so much easier for us to do it because we are allowed those emotional freedoms.
Yeah.
And so to take advantage of that, hey, let's speak about something sacred. This is the shit that I'm scared of, and you're not scared of it. So let me open up to you and hold space for me. And then let's form an alliance together, or friendship, or let me not think that because you're a catty bitch, you're going to attack me and then I'm fucked and I have to do this all by myself. Let me think that maybe you're an ally because we share this pain, and so we can understand together and we can hold each other's hands and make a bridge. And it's such a simple way of making global shift pretty quickly. I think the big thing is to be okay with being scared of each other and still going for it anyway. Right? Because the feminine is very collaborative, whereas the masculine is very kind of one-off. Where's my to-do list? Let me get this thing done. Let me just go until I don't have anything else to do. Whereas the feminine is all over the place, kind of building community, building bridges, taking care of people, doing 5 things at the same time because it's our natural talent. And so all together we make this kind of wall of resistance to say, hey, no, cut the bullshit. But we have to peel back the layer of, oh, your female coworker, your girlfriend's going to be a catty bitch, and fuck her, you can't trust your girlfriends because you can't go anywhere with them.
Yeah. Well, I feel like using that language that you used as an example is a good first step, kind of reevaluating our vocabulary so it becomes inclusive and conscious like that.
Yeah.
I think is a great first step, in all of our exchanges, instead of being reactive, coming from a place of like consciousness and positivity and
Sisterhood.
inclusion
Yeah.
and
Empathy.
empathy and even toward and definitely also toward the man who I agree are
Yeah.
like super oppressed, both emotionally and sexually and and financially, and there is like no space for them to even recognize that because they have to be like the king of the hill.
be a pussy, bro.
They gotta be like the territorial
Tagline.
warriors. You don't need a man, you need a warrior. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
It's okay. Like, there's nothing to fight. Yeah, you're just like Don Quixote. You're fighting a non-existent war.
Yeah. I mean, I make art about connection and love and kind of like really delicious things. And I find myself judging my own art thinking, oh, this is really cheesy. Oh, this is just kind of like superficial. I just want somebody to feel love. And I judge myself and I kind of reject it a little bit because I don't want to be rejected. And it's so much cooler to be, think that something's like, oh, and this is how it's going to go wrong. And this is, kind of take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
So it's a really vulnerable act to actually sit down and talk about love and talk about what you want, how you want to be touched, how you want to be intimate with somebody. Like, oh my God, it's so much easier to say, oh, you're fucking crazy. Like, you want me to lick your pussy and then like you're just gonna stroke my hair? Because to accept that, I feel like is in itself a revolutionary personal act that everybody has to go through when they experience sexuality. And it's so vulnerable that it's not a common thing to talk about, especially to teach about. So thank
because
you for
you
your
don't
service,
know,
Haley.
right? Because you don't know how it's going to be received.
Exactly.
And even if you're reassured that you're loved, you don't know how it's going to be received. You never know because it's not normative.
Exactly.
So, the person you're
And
speaking
it's-
to could have all kinds of triggers come up and could just run away because that's easier.
Yeah.
And find somebody who doesn't talk about this stuff and just does them.
So many, oh my God. Like, I'll be on dating profiles and I'll put in my bio, like, okay, I'm a sex educator, because I'd rather people know. The questions I get asked are like, oh, so then you'll teach me how to have sex. And I was like, no, I can show you to sex workers that will teach you how to have sex if that's your thing. But like for me, I come from a family of very rebellious women. And so the way I navigate and educate is primarily through Instagram. I can reach a vast majority of people, all ages, ethnicities. All you need is to have my little URL and you can get access to it wherever you're from. And the hard part is the censorship on there. And you have,
there is censorship everywhere.
I constantly, every day, it's like, okay, we're going to remove this. And then you have celebrities who are half naked. And I felt with Playboy because I love that there's a full female creative team right now. And it's hard for me because I'm like, okay, they're allowed to show this. And it's more for the viewer. And here I am educating and explaining like female pleasure, how to take nudes of yourself, like how to do anal play and all that stuff. And it's like, nope. That's too inappropriate, but like for me, that's the way I can
and that
educate
happens
people.
across the board. Like women-owned, even remotely sex-related businesses have trouble getting loans from banks.
Yeah,
they have trouble, in every way, like monetizing, even through apps.
Yeah.
So the censorship is real.
And I just all got to keep on going through it. And I hope that I have people that come to my page to learn the education and share it with people internationally. And that's how I know my voice is being heard. And I used to no one would allow me to have my voice. It was always like, okay, be quiet. You're a young lady in the South. Like, don't share your opinion with anyone. And I'd be like, oh my God, but like this is completely like what you're saying makes no sense. Like never ask a question, just pretend you know what everyone's saying.
Right.
And then
it
found
makes no sense.
That's
the funny thing about it, that like with the masculine logic that we've all been taught, this shit makes no sense. So I don't know how they're all buying it.
Yeah.
They're not.
It's like,
Everyone's a
it
little
makes
sad.
no sense. If you take a moment, and pull away from it.
Well, we also don't take those moments, though.
No.
We are so overprogrammed and over-consuming that we don't have time to be thoughtful and take those moments, which is, I think, deliberate.
Yeah, agree.
And if we're not taking those moments, we're never going to have that thought of, is this right? Something's not not working. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
we're so go, 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 go.
Yeah, yeah,
There's
for
no
sure.
room for it.
Yeah, yeah.
Again-
The system definitely controls us through
Yeah.
money and time. Those are the two, like,
The
you
power
know.
of the feminine. It's
Yeah,
so it's so powerful.
the
It's so
two
controlling
poles.
because it gives you that opportunity to really zoom back and say, hey, hold on, this actually doesn't work. Let's not follow those instructions, or let's not go through that system. And if you are the leader of that system, or if you're a believer in that system, why would you want a rebellious soul?
Oh, yes. People.
I mean, we do.
Yeah.
We need the rebels to come in to meander our path
Yeah.
so that we can finally find the balance. But I mean, being someone in control, being somebody who's in a leadership position, that rebellious person is really kind of pain in the ass. And they're really
yeah, but the
stepping into that
leadership
feminine.
people are super, censored. They are super
Yeah,
self-censored.
Absolutely.
So they've lost access to like
Yeah.
their emotional wealth.
Absolutely.
They've lost access to like the
they
variety
have
of the human
lost
experience.
their own access to the
To the-
feminine power.
Right. Yeah, and to
Yeah.
themselves,
Yeah.
to like the wealth
Their
of
own-
humanity,
their own feminine power, yeah.
yeah. And that's what I'm saying about like money and time, because they like are wealthy in money, and maybe that way they can also be wealthy in time eventually, even though I don't think they ever get freed up. They feel they kind of like don't feel any deeper. They don't feel like what they lack.
No.
And
I think they feel power. Like, I'm a sexual assault survivor, and I rebel in the way, like, I'm going to dress how I want to dress. I'm wearing a shirt that says clitoris with high-cut pants, and society will tell you, like, that's not how, like,
Right.
any trauma survivor should be dressing. And I'll have people Instagram be like, no wonder you were raped. Like, look at what you wear. Like, look at what you talk about. Like, you just scream someone that would be attacked. But I have my presence and my voice, and I'm there to heal people and show others that you can heal, and it's not how society wants you to. It's not how the
Yeah.
patriarchy
Yeah.
is like, oh, you got assaulted in a month and 3 days and 24 seconds. You're going to be perfect, and you're going to move on, and it's going to smell like daisies. And it's like, no.
no, you never really get over that
No,
trauma.
and it's the patriarchy and society that puts that on
Yeah.
to people. And like,
yeah.
you have, like, for me, I have that voice, and I'm gonna.
I mean, I
be
feel that
person.
now with Me Too, we're not in that place
Yeah.
that much anymore. I feel that there is much better understanding
Yeah.
for both of us. I mean, for all of us, meaning both, all genders.
genders.
Yeah.
Right. That, this is a scar that stays very, very, very long
Yeah.
term. And I, there have been enough repercussions. I think the difficulty is more in the healthiness
Yeah.
than in the disease,
Yeah.
We've kind of like been able, I hope it lasts, but for now, right, in the West, we've been able to kind of like, diagnose the extreme disease, of like lack of consent, like
Yes.
date rape,
Yes.
and, workplace harassment and
Yeah.
assault, things that were not quite clear
Yes.
before. Because before it was like rape was like the stranger who attacked you in the middle of the street,
Yeah.
or like, the conquerors who like, kidnapped
Yeah.
you, right? And now we understand that better.
Yeah.
But the positive aspect of that is still like extremely nebulous.
Yeah.
Like how do you have healthy, happy, conscious sexual exchange?
Because it wasn't until recently that spousal rape was even considered rape.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So
Yeah, and probably like that was most marriages.
Yeah. Oh, like coercion. I was talking to someone, and they didn't understand what coercion was. And I was like, okay, someone asks you the same question 49 times, and you say no all 49 times. Asks you it the 50th time, and you say yes. Is that consent? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, no, that's coercion. They finally broke you down enough to guilt trip you into being able to do something that you didn't want to do at all. They didn't
Right,
respect
right,
that. And that's
right.
like why, like, it's so scary when only 9 states teach what consent and coercion is. And
Right.
like, no one
There are
talks
many,
about
many
coercion.
levels of consent.
Yeah. And I didn't realize a lot
There's
of
like
my
a whole
yeah.
wheel of consent, so you
Yeah.
can go through like every stage.
And most of my
consent.
past sexual experience were coercion based, because it was like, no, I didn't really want to do this, but I ended up feeling guilty, and they would gaslight me into
Right,
where
you
I was
get
like,
to-
well,
yeah.
technically I did consent because I said the
Yeah.
word yes.
Yeah.
But nobody taught me that coercion does not equal consent. Like
Right.
maybe is not a consent or a
Right.
convince
Yeah.
me. And it's
Yeah.
like shaping the language so people understand that they have a choice. And especially within partnered relationships where like they'll gaslight you and hold it over your head like, oh, well, we had sex yesterday, or like, let's make it a goal to have sex like at least 3 times a week. Comes to that week, you're not in the mood. And it's like, well, we promised to do this. And like for a lot of people, it's scheduling time to have sex. But it's okay if you schedule the time and you're not in the mood.
Right.
Like just tell that to
Yeah.
the person you're with. And if you know about coercion and consent, like they'll be like, okay, I understand. Like we
Yeah.
don't have to do this.
Yeah, yeah. And for a while now, since the sexual revolution and the pill and all of that, I mean, our sexual liberation as women, such as it is so short-lived. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
That women felt. Like whatever, at least like I get to have sex, and my mom like never had sex except for like one man or
Yeah.
2 men. So let's just get it over with. Like I remember that concept of let's just get it over with, for a long time was woman's way to kind of like deal with unwanted sex, because you knew that there would be no justice, that there is no system to go to outside, especially if it's with a friend or a mentor or a husband or all of that stuff. It's just so complicated, and it seemed easier to just kind of like whatever, close your nose
Allow
and
it to
just let it
happen.
yeah, let it happen and go wash up and just forget that this happened.
Move on with your day.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
There was no recourse. There was no recourse. There was no
There
legal
was no-
recourse. There was
no.
no societal recourse.
And there's still not really easy recourse.
Yeah.
It's a
Not at
hell of
all.
a lot of complication, money. Who is paying for these lawyers?
and then just the
it's
emotional
not like
trauma of reliving it, of having to
relive
go
it in
before-
public.
Yeah.
And what people will think. What will a jury of your peers who may not be
Yes.
like-minded think?
Yeah.
Will they think that qualifies as something to create so much trouble?
Yeah.
Over. Will even like the prosecutor go ahead? Most of the time, no. If it's
No.
like really gray area, they'd rather not bother because they want to win cases. So yes, it's about our, I feel that what you were saying, is that the education aspect will allow us as women who still, as it turns out, receive, more than initiate, to know for ourselves and kind of make these choices firmly,
Yes.
right, in
Yes.
advance, and stand by them.
Oh, yeah.
And be in that space of like, yes, I know what I want. I know what I want, and I get to speak to it, and I'm
Yes.
okay with the consequences. If the consequences are like, losing my partner, like, what's the worst that will happen here? I say no, and maybe he or she feels that I no longer love them, and
Yeah.
it's over. Well, it may be better than being pressured all
Yes,
the time.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if it means like I gotta find a new roommate, or I need, whatever it is, like the consequences, it's worth it because
Yeah.
you
Well,
gain your voice in exchange.
Yeah. And especially
your truth.
Yeah.
I feel like you wanna achieve world peace. Get on my nerves. Get on one of my clitoral nerves. Let's do
Yeah,
that.
any clitoral nerve of anybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's get on each other's clitoral nerves.
Yeah, and get like the
Achieve
bliss.
world peace.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and get into that like portal of bliss. And
Yeah,
keep that
I love
up.
that you said portal of bliss because it's very often that I'll speak to specifically a woman, and I'll tell her about, your pussy's a portal. Your connection to God is where life comes out of. This is where when you're being penetrated, your penetrator goes in to reconvene with God. Like you're a temple.
Yeah.
You are a
Definitely,
temple.
it's
And
your
this is
temple.
the first
Yeah.
time so many people, so many women specifically have heard, you are a temple. Nobody that I know has ever spit on a temple floor. Like who disgraces...
Unless if it's consensual.
Well, okay. Right. Exactly. But like the idea of of our bodies being a temple, our bodies being
Well,
sacred.
that's been around. It's just a little bit, like your body's and temple has also been used though in the other way.
Yes,
There's no
yes,
opposites
yes,
really,
yes,
but like
yes.
it's like don't desecrate your body by letting anybody save
Penetrate you or whatever, blah, blah,
save
blah.
yourself.
Maintain the purity of the temple.
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. Right. But the idea of like,
Save your purity. Wear your chastity belt so
Yes.
your temple
Right.
is waiting
Your flower will crumble.
when your night comes.
Yes, yes.
the idea of the reverse, like you are the holder of the portal to God, and so you have the birthright to be respected and to request consent and to talk about what it is that you're going to do to my body when you come into my body. Like the state of relaxation that I must be in to enjoy pleasurable sex needs to be at a certain level for me to enjoy. But since I am the temple for God, for the universe, then it's a requirement. You go to church and you pay the tithe, right? You go to church and you are quiet to listen to the pastor.
Wait,
right?
so we should charge tithe? I like that idea. Wait.
I don't object to that.
Yeah. And
Wait,
you know,
let's
it
get
could,
back to the tithe.
yeah. You can, by the way, that's a new
10%
word.
of your earnings.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And like,
Come to church,
does
baby.
that, yeah, exact. Come to church.
Yeah.
Come in church. If you're going to come in church, that's a
Yeah.
whole different,
Yeah, yeah.
But like,
That's funny.
yes,
She's
yes,
funny.
I'm going to charge you to come into me. And I'm going to charge you time. I'm going to charge you attention. I might even charge you money, but I'm definitely charging you respect. These are the things that you got to do to come in.
Part of the task here is to try and get the heterodominant religion away from the masculine, because you're speaking in metaphors, my love.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I am very much.
Yeah, which is beautiful.
Thank you.
But we're not allowed to be priests in most dominant
Correct,
religions.
yeah.
Even
Yes.
priests, forget like bishops, forget the popes, forget
And also the idea
patriarchs,
of God when I say
forget
it.
like the ayatollahs, forget like whatever whoever the Hindu one is, like the Gandhi or right. So we have been kept away from that. You menstruate, you're not even setting foot in the freaking church. So to kind of like make the metaphor into reality is, I think, how like it becomes real, it becomes a social shift.
Yeah.
And if it means like, starting churches or, making sure like the church includes us and,
Yes.
And honors that, because they speak to it, they speak to like, oh my God, every child is holy and we have to hold on to every child and
Blah, blah,
but
blah.
Yeah. But like, how do you show that in action?
Yeah.
How do you, empower the woman who gives birth to these children? And how do you
take care of
worship her
after-
ability
Yes.
to give birth?
Yes.
Right.
And take care of her after birth.
Exactly. Yeah.
During.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I feel like we've come to a good place.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to have something else that you'd like to?
I want to say on air that I
Yes.
had a great time.
I had a blast.
Thank you so much for
much.
having us. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank
welcoming
you.
us into
Thank
this.
you for
Yeah.
coming and come back.
Fabulous.
We'll keep
yes,
it going.
yes.
Yeah. And
Thank you.
And let's manifest that accessibility for ourselves,
Yeah.
our
Yes.
voices, our sisters, all our the pussy power, all of it.
Yes.
Yes.
The Pussy Power Posse.
And thank you for listening, everyone. Thank you for trusting us as your sex whisperers. And until next week, speak sex. If I could make love incessantly, I would be God.